There to Laurie Schwab with the New York Cosmos.
Johnson. Still Johnson. Jones, this looks dangerous for Brisbane Lions. Jones, a good cross. Johnson. Arnold's forward, so's Manus Lamont, still Robbie Slater. Twisting and turning, getting that one across. Lamont! Manus Lamont!
Play on, says the referee. Hayes is onside again. Shot! It's in the net! What a great goal by Graham Hayes! No call! Score!
Salamini for Cole. Cole on the run. Shoots. 2-0.
Lazanovsky with the free kick. Launches a rocket! Trimboli. What vision!
Blasts.
Yes! That's it!
Miljevic.
Beautiful goal! Here's Bozanic. They might have won it!
Teammate from Heidelberg United and another local product, Charlie Ankus. How do you feel, Charlie?
A bit nervous, but I think I'll get used to it. Just get used to it and really put in 100%.
I'm joined by Mark Robertson, who's sitting in the lovely sunshine in the UK. I know it's hard to believe, but unless it's a virtual background, I can see a bit of sun there. Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, mate. Yeah, you're right. It is a little bit of sunshine. It's we try not to talk too much about sunshine here because it disappears quite quickly and then it rears its ugly head, as they say, because then everyone starts whinging that it's too hot.
Okay. All right. Well, let's hope it just lasts, and I'll try not to mention it again. How's that?
Yeah.
Not to jinx it. Hey, you've had a sensational career in terms of you've travelled the world, you've played at some big clubs, you've won an NSL Grand Final, which I really, really want to get into, the story behind that. One of the probably, if not the greatest NSL Grand Final, certainly one of the most famous Grand Finals. Come from a huge footballing family, so the lineage goes back to your dad, who had a long career at Sydney City in the NSL and eastern suburbs Hakoah, as it probably would have been in the early days. And your son's running around at the moment, and I don't think we're going to get a scoop at the end of this about what nation he's going to choose. There's no scoop, is there, at the end of this?
I'd love to give you one, mate, because you know where my allegiance lies.
Okay, all right. So there's no scoop. All right, we won't keep people hanging on for that. No fake news here. More importantly, where do we find you today, work-wise and soccer-wise?
So I'm blessed to still be involved in the game. Like you said, moving back to the UK from Australia, you're never quite sure as to what role you'll pick up. Now, many people will look at this and say, well, he's only there because of his son. But I work for Manchester City Football Club. I work in the scouting and recruitment department. What my job role entitles is trying to find the next Alexander, who is my son. And the reason behind that is because I had and played such a big part in his development as not just a father, but as a mentor and definitely as a coach. The amount of years that I coached him from day dot to when he first come across to Manchester United was just me, and it was just my dad, and it was just my staff, and it was just the people that I was willing to allow to have contact with him and educate him, basically. So the club, knew a little bit about the background, but then when we went into it, they said, "What role have you played?" They said, "Perfect, Mark. We would love you to go out and find us the next Alexander." Now, whether that be an Australian or whether that be someone from South America or Asia, then so be it. So I'm classified as a world scout, which is great, and I do have the ability to travel, which is good. I get abroad every other month, which is great. It's good for me to get out and see what standards are out there. And you know what, mate? I was killing two birds with one stone, because any age group that I would watch that was anywhere close to relative to Alexander, I could then feed back to where Alexander was up to. So if I didn't think he was, putting himself into a position of expressing himself, if I didn't think he was willing to get on the ball and really be involved, I'd go back and say, mate, I watched Anderlecht the other day, or I watched Ajax, or I was, abroad watching great teams, and this is what their number 8 was doing. So, mate, it was perfect. It was marriage made in heaven. The club are really happy with everything that I'm doing in regards to bringing general players to the forefront. But the players I bring to the forefront are different to players that many other scouts bring to the forefront. And that's, I don't know what it is. I can't even put my finger on it. And I'm not saying I'm the world's best scout, but I look for different things in players which I would love to coach. So is it coachability? 1,000%. Attitude, the way they carry themselves, body language, demeanor, all of those things. I don't care if you put the ball in the net 10 times. I need to see something different,
How do you get into that something different? So what access do you have to, say, a player that you're watching at Anderlecht, per se? How much access do you have to him to find out about all those other traits?
So the beauty about working for Manchester City is you have a badge. Now, that badge gets you access all areas, if that makes sense. So when you go to tournaments, especially abroad, you're treated like a rock star, because ultimately they know that you have the power or the ability to influence potentially one of their players making a bigger sort of money move across the continent. So that's good. So I do get to speak to people behind the scenes. In England, no-go zone. You are told you will stand here. Don't you move from that spot. If security sees you moving from that spot, you're out of here. Don't speak to any staff. Don't speak to any players. And I find that really strange because, you will get to know me. I'm so busy and lively, mate. And I know so many people. So when someone comes up to me in England and wants to speak to me, I'm like, don't speak to me. Don't speak to me, mate. I'm going to get chucked out, When I go abroad, I put on this mad accent and I start speaking to people. Hey, what about number 6 over there? And it just evolves, mate. And I think the nature of me as a person, I'm very much a people's person. So people open up a little bit more. And if I wanted to abroad, I could go and speak to parents. I can get information. Yeah. So I do that. And then the rest, like you were saying there, is my eye and my imagination. And, is it a glass ceiling? Where do I see this kid potentially playing? Do I see him potentially playing for Man City, or do I see him playing for one of our other clubs in the group, like Melbourne City, Girona, Yokohama? Where do I see this kid eventually playing? And then my feedback to the football club, which gets put in the database, is endless amounts of information, really, on what I see and what I believe.
Okay, so is it a full-time job?
Yeah, it's as full-time as I want to make it, because one of the stipulations when I come on board is I didn't want to move away from Alexander, in a sense of when he plays, I don't work. When he travels, I don't work because I travel. And maybe it was something that I hung on to a little bit too much, in the hope that I was able to sit next to him in the changing room. You know what I mean? It was, and I'm slowly starting to let go of that, because he'd sat next to me since he was 5 years old on my bench at Hakoah. He sat next to me on a ball when I was cursing and swearing at the boys for Hakoah. And so he's lived and breathed the game with me, and I've lived and breathed the game with him, but he's flown the nest now, mate.
Yeah, fair enough. And how is he travelling, just by the way, at the moment?
Yeah, he's good, mate. Look, he is the most humble kid you will ever meet. Just signed his pro contract at Manchester City, so you can imagine what comes with that status. Don't need to go into it, but you wouldn't know with him. He's quite happy to wear his thongs, a pair of Billabong boardies and a singlet. And I think a lot of that is stuff that he's picked up off me or my mates. Lucas Neal, Hayden Fox, Chris Coyne, 3 of the guys that were the closest to Alexander you could ever be, and three of the most humble blokes you will ever meet, who love wearing boardies, love having like a stubby in their hand, and just the knockabout Aussie blokes, mate. So he's no different.
Very good, very good. Glad to hear it. We wish him luck and continued success. Let's go back to Sydney, 1977. That was when it began, wasn't it? Born in Sydney, is that right?
It was, mate. Paddington, which has now got beautiful apartments there. So it was the Royal Women's Hospital in Paddington. And, if when you're born, you're given a bit of land, I would have loved someone to say, here you go, Robbo, here's a bit of land in Paddington. Okay. A long way from home for my mum, because obviously born and raised in Edinburgh she was, and so was my dad. So, I look back on it now, and my wife's been through something similar. Alexander was born in Scotland and my daughter was born in Swindon when I played for those two clubs. So I look at my mum, and she was a million miles away from her close-knit family when she had me in Australia. So it's funny how the world evolves, and we would never have imagined being in these situations, but you make do. And my dad and my mum are still together, and I think they are the only couple that are still together from that Sydney City Phillips Soccer League days. So wow. which is a massive feat in this day and age. I've been married for donkeys, mate, and yeah, everyone has their ups and downs in marriages, but my dad is the most solid guy who will always stick by his family. And I think it's a credit to both mum and dad that's what they done, travelled to the other side of the world for starters, and made a life for themselves. And my dad's a very successful person now in that sense,
Very good. So what are your very first football memories? Like, when do you recall? Yeah, football memories for me were playing in the sunshine first and foremost. And, I can only imagine someone brought up in this country would say the piss and rain and the mud. For me, it was oranges at halftime. It was playing in the sunshine. It was me with long, sandy hair because we lived in Bondi, and my brother and us two kicking the crap out of each other in a hallway, in the backyard. We'd play outside for hours and hours and hours. We were told to come in. We weren't allowed balls in the house, believe it or not, even though my dad was a footballer, because we wrecked everything. So we used to blow up a balloon, and we used to play a game called No Rules. So when the balloon was sort of like moving around, it was all in slow motion. So you'd come through with elbows, or you'd slide tackle your brother. And mate, it was unbelievable. And then, we found out that if you put duvets on the floor, then you could play even harder because your slide tackles don't burn your legs and stuff. So we had a balcony at one end. I say one end, it was like bloody 2 yards long, this flat in Hall Street in Bondi. It was a balcony at one end, so that was a big door. And then I had the door that went out into the living room. Yeah. So mum and dad would sit out there, and every now and again my dad would come flying in and just start tailing us with a couple of hits. He'd go, I told you to keep it down. I don't know what he was watching or whatever, but yeah, we were brought up pretty rough, mate. Me and my brother would play this no rules game, and my dad wasn't shy to hit us when we were bad. So I think, going into it later on, I'd like to think that I was probably a player you wouldn't want to be playing against in a competitive match, let's say. Yeah, so you loved your tackling from an early age.
Loved it, mate. Loved it. We, me and Joe Watson's kid, Kevin, we used to, he then had a brother-in-law, a stepbrother, because Joe got remarried. But, so it was me and my brother, Kevin and his stepbrother, and we'd play the no rules again, but in the park at Jellicoe, which was just across from where Kev lived. And we'd always sit and sort of play games sort of indoors when it was sunny for some reason. And then as soon as you started to see the rain, game on, because you could get slide tackles. So we'd go jumpers for goalposts, and then that was it, mate. And I remember there was a couple of potential leg breakers and a couple of clashes of shins. And what's crazy, and people won't ever imagine this, is you had to play in bare feet. So you weren't allowed to wear shoes. Yeah. You had to play in bare feet. So you can imagine my feet were like rocks by the time I come to England to play. And I'd stubbed my toe that many times, whether it was playing cricket in the street or football in the backyard on the concrete jungle in Bondi. But I got great memories, mate. I could give you 1,000, but that's That's the long and short of it, mate.
No, that's good. That's good. A very Aussie upbringing.
Yeah.
With some hard Scottish tackling.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
You've got to have that mix of culture, right?
Oh yeah, mate. Yeah. And I sat on the ball next to Eddie Thompson in every changing room, home and away. I sat on the bench at Pratton Park when the riot kicked off, and mate, I was heavily involved. And Alexander, now named after my dad, is no different, mate. So he's gone through the similar journey to what I did, but I never played for Man City, mate, unfortunately.
Cool. Hey, the riot. So I've spoke to Mike Hill recently because he was doing the commentary, and everyone else has had their say. So Mike was there, but kind of up in the commentary box and pretty safe. He called it. Yeah. But if you're sitting on the bench as a young kid, how old were you roughly?
I would have been about eight years old, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right. You scared? You excited? What's going through your head? People running on the field?
I was buzzing, mate, because I was in charge at the beginning of most games to take around, you know, the old mesh money bags?
Yeah.
I used to take that round the changing room and everyone put their wallets and their phones and stuff. Not their phones, sorry. Their wallets and watches and rings and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
The valuables. So then obviously I was your little mascot. So I'd come out and I'd sit on the bench and I'd put the valuables underneath me and then I'd have to bring it in at half time and blah, blah, blah. So it never left our side, mate, especially when you go away a few of these dodgy, let's call them away grounds, you know. So I'm sitting there and this is kicked off and it was John Paul Marconi had grabbed me. There was a few others of the youngsters that grabbed me and just sort of like ran me in because John Paul and Frank Farina used to babysit for me. They were my babysitters basically when my dad would get out on the piss or whatever, you know. So they grabbed me and sort of like run me in and blah blah blah. So long story short, I was halfway in and I seen Big Timber getting like flogged at this stage, and I just wished I was a bigger person. And if I look back on it now, I just wanted to help people, you know, and the guy with the bloody corner flag and the medical box. And so I'm halfway into the changing room because someone said, my dad said, grab Mark, you know. And then I thought, shit, I forgot the valuables. So I'm just at the entrance of the cage to go in. I was like, far out. So I've hoed back there, dodging through people, and no one knew who I was, you know. No. So then it was just still sitting there, the valuables and that. So I've just grabbed a hold of that, and I was like, geez, the boys will kill me if I don't have this. Got back in, and basically we were locked in the changes for like a good hour and a half, solid 2 hours till it all calmed down. But look, no surprise, mate. Yes, Timber was great for winding people up. Jerry Gomez was probably the most unorthodox tackler you will ever meet. Nicest guy in the world, not a malicious bone in his body, but just so uncoordinated when it comes to stuff like that. And the rivalry was the rivalry, mate. You know what it was like.
Yeah.
You know?
No, and according to, I think, I can't be too certain if Mike said it on camera or off camera, but I think he said it had been sort of building for a while anyway. So it's kind of like came to a head, like it was going to happen sooner or later. And
yeah, and we had no fans. It's as simple as that. Yeah. We had no fans. I mean, people talk about the skinheads and stuff like that. Look, I think they were just friends of friends. I think they were Eddie Thompson's son, Steve Thompson's mates, basically, and the John Foxmans of the world that sort of had their sort of boys. But, mate, they were harmless. They looked worse than what they were. So for someone to say a riot kicked off, it wasn't a riot, mate. It was just an onslaught of footballers. That's basically what it was, mate. You know, and 20 years later, I was sat in a cafe in Spain in the off season when I was playing at Burnley or something like that. And then this image come on, and I was like, turn that up a bit. So the lady turned it up, and what it was the worst football moments in the world, and it was the riot for Sydney Olympic.
We made it worldwide, didn't we?
Made it worldwide, mate. You know, yeah.
Very good. All right. More importantly, talk about your junior soccer days. Where did you play your junior footy?
So I started at Sydney City because Dad was playing for Sydney City. So back then we had all the way through the ranks back down to, you know, I started the same as everyone else at under sixes, Queen's Park, not small-sided goals. It was 11v11 at 6 years old. And if you wanted to join in. If you didn't, just stand and look at the birds in the sky. So Sydney City, it then turned into a club that sort of like folded. So then I had to move on. So I went to Astrolabe, which was, no one will ever know that it even existed, mate. It was a very small community club that sat next to East Lakes Golf Course on the sort of interlink of Sydney there. And then Maroubra United. So look, my most solid days of achieving were at Maroubra United. And not to be big-headed, but sometimes the clubs that you go to, people follow. So when I went to Maroubra United, we all sort of went to Maroubra United as such, and we'd done the Champions of Champions. We'd done all the great things that you would do. So Maroubra United is the only club that's still standing now that I played for in Australia as a junior. So, when people ask me, what's your junior club? Well, Maroubra United is my junior club, and I was born and raised just up the road from there. If I wasn't in Bondi, then we moved to Maroubra. So we lived in Maroubra. And so I've got a lot of good memories, mate. I had great people, great friends, still friends with them today, from the kids that I was friends with when I was 6 years old. Every now and again, they'll reach out to me. I'll reach out to them. Remember this, remember that. My dad was never my coach. Too busy. So Joe Watson ended up taking over as our coach when we went into this. So it's funny we're talking about this. I played for Maroubra United. I went to Waverley College. So I played for Waverley College, and I then played for Southern and Eastern representative side. So I trained Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and I played 3 games at the weekend. And then people say now, are our kids playing too much football? And I say they're not playing anywhere near enough football, mate, unfortunately.
Yeah, you can never play enough football.
No.
I mean, that's the way to learn. That's the way to improve. And fatigue is, I don't know, nonsense. No, that's right. So you ended up doing an apprenticeship, per se, at Marconi. How did that come about? And was it like very similar type scenario to a UK apprenticeship? Is that what they were trying to mimic at the time? Or how did that work out for you?
Yeah, so basically, and just quickly on that last one is, playing all of that football, I was a superstar in a bubble. I was the best player in the eastern suburbs, but as soon as I ventured, across King George's Road and I got out west, I got a slapping down because there were some good footballers there. So then every state trial, every time there was a schoolboys trial, sorry, mate, you're not good enough. And there was me. I was wearing my Celtic strip or my Scotland strip, and maybe I should have been wearing a different strip. Who knows? But I try to be as loud as I could with the socks and the strip because you get attraction. And my dad said, "Don't worry about it, son. Don't worry about it, son. Your time will come." And I was like, "This is crap. I don't want to play football anymore, and I can't make these teams." And I'm doing so well in my own eastern suburbs and blah, blah, blah. And so I never made anything, mate, never made anything. So to answer your story about Marconi, this will blow you away. I'm playing now in a side in the eastern suburbs, right, which is an eastern suburbs school side, and I'm playing in a tournament. And people started to realise I was a good player. Darren McDonald and Matty O'Shea were playing in this tournament, and I got to know them, right? As you do, you sort of sit in a tent, you have your sandwiches, and mate, you should come down to the club that we play for and have a trial. And I was like, who are you with? And says, Marconi. And I said, they're not going to want me. I says, I don't play in the state sides or anything like that. And they said, mate, you're a good player, you should come down. Right, so I turn up. Anyway, so I go to these open trials pre-season, and there's about 1,000 people there. So we're in the changing rooms and we're getting changed. We go out and it's a game, and I'm shitting myself, right? And I'm like, I shouldn't be here, mate. It took me 3 days to get here from the eastern suburbs. Everyone's a good player. They just look like good players. Like I remember they had muscles in their legs and veins, and I'm thinking, bloody hell, man. Like I was 16. We were all 16, and I wasn't a man yet. And So I was like, this isn't for me, man. And my head wasn't right. Anyway, they had this this roll call, and it was Johnny Haynes. So Hainesy was doing the roll call. Ashby was another one who was a coach, and so my name wasn't called out. So the names got called out. So everyone sort of like went out onto the fields. It was 2 fields, at the back of Marconi Stadium there. They got the training pitches. So you can imagine 11, 11, 11, 11. So that's 44 players. And here's number 45. And they looked at me and went, "Who are you?" And I went, "Oh, my name's Mark Robertson." They says, "All right." It says, looked around. They says, "What are you doing here?" And I says, "Oh, Darren McDonald and Matty O'Shea had said that I should come down for a trial." And they went, "Sorry, mate, you need to be invited to come down here, And I said, I know. And I had the full Marconi strip on because all the strips were laid out. And I thought that was unbelievable that the strips had been laid out. So I was like, "Well, okay, you don't have my name, but throw me out there and see what I can do." And they're like, "No, mate, it doesn't work like that. This is Marconi Fairfield." Let's be honest, it was probably one of the biggest clubs in Australia at the time. Yeah, it'd be like rocking up to Man United and saying to Sir Alex, "I'm here for a trial," and they were like, "Nah, mate, nah." So went away. I went into it's funny, right? This will probably show my character. So they wouldn't let me train. So those games kicked off, and I had this biggest walk of shame back into the changing rooms to then get my gear, to then get like 2 trains and 3 buses home. So when I went in there and I was getting changed, there was loads of Marconi gear on the floor. I opened my school bag up and filled my school bag with all these Marconi strips that had been worn by Ian Gray and all the guys. And I thought, bloody hell, you know what? If they're not going to give me a trial, I'm flogging all their gear, mate. So at home now, I'm gonna give you, because I'll see your memorabilia. I've got loads of them in the house back in Australia in the loft, right? So they're the old Brescia, sponsored, a beautiful green. And I used to watch them on telly, and I thought, I'm taking some of this. So the shorts and the red socks, the white shorts, the green top, right? So I thought, I loved it, So I went home and I was disappointed. I walked in at about midnight by the time I got home because it was so far away from my house. And my dad goes, "How'd you go?" And I says, "Nah." I said, "Dad," "they didn't even let me train." And he goes, "You're joking?" And I was like, "Nah." He never got involved in my career once, right? He must have picked up the phone. He's never told me to this day. He must have picked up the phone because I got a phone call from John Haynes about 4 days later, right? John Haynes was the state team manager. He was at Marconi, very cliquey. No one knew me apart from this bloke that used to rock up to every trials. So he rings me and he goes, "I found out who you are, found out that you're okay to come for a trial." I felt like telling him, "Piss off. I don't want to come."
Of course.
Swallowed my pride and I went, "No worries."
Yeah.
And I was going to say, "Do you want me to bring the gear back?"
Don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah. So I thought he was ringing to say,
"Where's the gear?"
All the gear. So I said, "Yeah, no worries, I'll come back." So I walked in and Matty O'Shea and Macca, Darren McDonald, like, "Hey, Robbo's back." Anyway, so I strapped on the boots. I was unbelievable, right? Seriously unbelievable. That was the first night. Went back the second night. The third night, I was inside the stadium with the first team. So I'd gone from this crap, didn't even get a look in, nearly crying, packing all his gear, going back to Maroubra. I was in with the first team.
Santiago Muniz.
Yeah, mate, yeah, like everyone you can imagine.
Yeah.
Big Bobby Catlin, Harps, blah, blah, blah. And so it was Andrea Cardi had been watching these games out the back and said, "Who's that?" He says, "Oh, it's young bloke. We haven't even signed him." He goes, "I want him in training with the first team." So I'm scratching my head. I'm going home, going to my dad. "Dad, have you said something here, mate? I'm in with the first team. Like, what's going on?" And no. But the first time I walked into training, and this will sum it up, I went into the Marconi, when I was told to go in, I went into the Marconi first team changing room where the spa was. You could smell the chlorine. I went in and I went to sit in the first team changing room, right? And they looked at me. Iggy looked at me and he goes, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I was like, "Sorry?" And he goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, I've been told to come in. I was out the back training with the reserves, and he goes, the away changing room, and just went like that. And I went, oh, okay, no worries. So I stood up and walked back out, walk of shame again, into the away changing room, sat there by myself for half an hour waiting to be called out for training.
You got the prank.
But not just that. It was like, how dare you walk into our changing room when you've not kicked the ball for us? Yeah. So I'm sat for half an hour in this away changing room, regathering my thoughts, thinking, mate, I just want to go back to Maroubra and I want to wake up for my surf tomorrow morning again. I just, but I fought through it, mate, and I was a fighter. And so I went out to training and I probably took out a lot of anger and I kicked the shit out of all these blokes, right? And Andrea Cardi pulled me over afterwards. He goes, you do very well, my son. And I said, oh, okay, thank you. And I didn't know what it was going to look like for me, mate. But from then on, I was pulled into the first team at 16. I was signed on a contract, and now let's get to the apprenticeship. They were like, we've got to get this kid on an apprenticeship. So myself, Vaughan Hunter and Buddy Farah were seen as 3 up-and-coming promising boys at Marconi. So they pulled us in. The Labazetta brothers pulled us in. Frank Cicluna, guys, we want you to sign a contract. We're going to send you to college 3 times a week. When you're not at college, you're going to come into the office and you're going to work for us. And I'm like, mate, this sounds unbelievable, right? The only thing is I live about an hour and a half away from this place. I'm like, yeah, I'm in, mate. So we done it. So we went to college on Oxford Street in the city. So other people that were there was sort of like Mark Rudin, Babich from Sydney United. So they had their 3. We had our 3. And we just sort of like amalgamated with all the general punters of this college. And we learned how to type. When I send you an email, I'm a 4-finger typer because they taught me that. And so then I'd go back into the club, and if I wasn't bombing up and down those stairs in the Marconi Football Club chasing, short blacks with a dash of Sambuca in it for the Labazetta brothers, I was working, mate. Ross Musso was there. Gabby was there, and they'd say, oh, Mark, can you do this? Can you run down here? And mate, we would just go for this, mate. Go for this, go for that. And I was like, this is class. And I was getting paid for it. So we'd scoop some money and we'd have the time of our lives, the 3 of us. And then we'd train at night with the first team. And so it was a real apprenticeship, mate. And then I went on and made my debut for the senior team. And then I travelled, mate. I travelled Australia with Marconi at the age of 17 when I made my debut, and I was the kiddie runner on the nights out. So Iggy or someone else would hold the kiddie that the club would give us. The club would give us $1,000 to go out and have a few beers afterwards as team bonding, and we'd all be sat there. And Robbo, youngest, yeah, okay. So they give me like $100. I had to go up and get like 10 schooners and 10 vodkas or whatever it was, and bring them all back. And JP would be like, is a change there, Robbo? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, you didn't keep any for yourself? And I said, you know me, mate. I'm not that sort of person, And everything was accounted for from me. And I was probably the best apprentice to have around the place because I wasn't too proud to say that I'd fought to get there. And I'm willing to do much, much more now to become even better, mate. So I then went on and was captain of the under-20s Australian side, and people seen me as quite a decent figure in Australian football.
Yeah, no, that's good. So at what point were you getting some young Socceroo call-ups? When did that all begin? Pretty
much straight away, mate. So
you're at the right place with Marconi for that sort of stuff too, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
In the shop window.
Yeah, it's like now over here, if you play for Man City, there's more often the chance you're going to play for England at some stage, whether it's juniors or whatever. So to play 17 in the National Soccer League, I was playing week in, week out, mate, in the end. So if I wasn't playing midfield, I'd play right wing back and Luke Castley would play left wing back. Or if Luke wasn't playing, then I'd play left wing back or I'd play centre midfield. But it was hard to get into that midfield, mate. We had some really good players there, like as I said, we had Gary Van Egmond was there at the time, JP was there, Iggy was there, Harpsy, and then obviously it evolved where Manfred Schaefer come in. Now, that took me to another level because I was that Manfred Schaefer type of player. So I played every week. And so to play at 17 men's football in Australia every week, then no doubt you're going to get called up. So my first call up was to the under-20 squad, which was 3 years older than me. So that was Tiago, Richie Plesher, Mark Viduka, Robbie Ennis. So I got called into that, and I'm sitting there going, these guys are superstars, mate. What am I actually doing here, you know? And Fluggers pulled me over and he says, you know why I brought you in? And I says, no. And he says, I think you're capable of playing in this team. And that was the Qatar World Cup, which was before the World Cup I attended. I attended the Malaysia one. And I went home to my dad and I said, Dad, if I go to this World Cup, this is like phenomenal 12 months for me. I was basically just kicking sand in the eastern suburbs. And now he goes, but that's football, champ. That's just the way it goes, mate. It can change quickly. So then didn't go to that World Cup, but then become the captain of the next squad. And everyone sort of pinned a lot on me and that sort of thing. And then, and then a few things went wrong for me in that respect. I kind of got a bit of a reputation, let's say, for going out and being on the party scene and blah, blah, blah. And
did you get a reputation or were you actually doing it?
Probably a bit of both.
Okay. So it was deserved.
I got caught for things that I didn't do and then never got caught for things I should have got caught for.
So it was pretty fair then.
Well, mate, I was dragged into a first-team environment at 17 and I was the drinks runner in nightclubs in Brisbane, South Australia, Perth, you name it. It was only inevitable that the money that you put in my pocket, I'd go back to Maroubra and I'd probably just do the same on the weekends. So, yeah. Okay. I've only got my accountability, responsibility. Let's go back to that.
That's cool. That's right. You know that. So you're already getting first-team football, young Socceroos, captain, life's good, and now you're starting to get a sniff for overseas, right? So was that something that you wanted to do? Did it come knocking and surprise you like the Marconi thing, or was it more coming from your end that you wanted to go overseas at this stage?
No, I had no idea what overseas looked like. I had no idea. I basically got a phone call from a guy called Gary Williams, who's an agent. Come and meet me down at Doyle's in Watson's Bay. Let's have a chat. Someone had given him my number. So I went down, had a chat with him. Long story short, think you're a fantastic player. Think you'll do a job in England, etc. So I'm like, okay, no dramas. I then went and played in the World Youth Championships in Malaysia. My ticket would then take me from Malaysia straight to the UK, and I'd meet Gary Williams in the UK. I started training with Nottingham Forest straight from Malaysia. I was there for about a week, and I tweaked my hamstring. So obviously, some really high-intensity football at the World Youth Cup in zapping conditions in Malaysia, boiling hot. I thought I'd done okay in that Youth World Cup. Probably didn't live up to maybe where I should have been, but hey, I'd done okay. And come over, tweak my hamstring. So I'd be out then for 3 weeks. Notts Forest were like, Gary Williams, mate, he's decent, but he's out now and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I get it, Gaz, I get it. You don't need to explain anything. I've only been here for a week. I've been injured. Most embarrassing thing as a trialist is sitting in the physio room. It's like, get me out of here. So I then left there and went through a series in Birmingham, series of recovery sort of weeks where I'd get myself right. And then I went to Glasgow Rangers. So walked into the change room at Glasgow Rangers in a tracksuit, was asked why I wasn't wearing a suit. And I was like, a suit? Why would I wear a suit? And every day we wear a suit to training. And I was thrust into the first team changing room, and everyone was staring at me. Craig Moore come up to me, for bless him. He come up to me and says, "Oh, you're from Australia?" Blah blah blah. And I was like, "Yeah." And so we know each other's friends, and so then I just started training. So on trial at Glasgow Rangers was myself, Gattuso, and Jonathan Johansson. So the three of us stayed in the same hotel in the middle of Glasgow, and I stayed for a week. And then Walter Smith and Archie Knox pulled me in and said, "We spoke to your agent. We've suggested that you stay for 4 weeks so we can get a real good look at you. You've done really well, trained with the first team, blah, blah, blah." I said, "Okay, no worries." I then went back to Gaz. I said, "Gaz, what's going on?" I said, "They want me to stay for 4 weeks. Gattuso's staying for 4 weeks. Jonathan Johansson's staying for 4 weeks. They want me to stay for 4 weeks." I thought, based off what I'd done in Malaysia and what I'd played in Australia, they'd make a decision. How naive am I, thinking that I was a great player and they should have signed me at 18 years old? And he said, "Well, that's the plan." And I said, "Well, you best ring Marconi because pre-season training starts next week." So he gets on the blower, back to Marconi. "No, we want him back, we want him back, we want him back." Anyway, I don't have 4 weeks up my sleeve. I've got, at best, a couple of days. So jumps on the plane, flies down to Manchester, needed to get a train to Birmingham. And so I'm sitting there, I'm doing all this myself. And if Gaz wasn't travelling me around, and he rings me and he says, "Chris Waddle wants to sign you at Burnley." And I said, "What?" I said, "Where's this come from, mate?" And I thought, is he clutching at straws here or what? Like, I'd never heard of Burnley. I was like, where is that? I know who Chris Waddle is. Yeah. Where is Burnley? So I had a little look around, found out where Burnley was. I said, "Does he want to trial me or does he want to sign me?" And he goes, "He wants you to play in a game just to see that you're moving about and you're mobile." And I said, "So he wants to trial me?" And Gaz goes, "No, Robbo." He says he wants to sign you, but he wants to. So anyway, I went and played in this trial game against Rotherham on a Wednesday night. And I'm due to fly out to Australia on the Friday. And I tore the shed down at Rotherham, done really well and straight in. So I was back in first team training the next day with Burnley. And I said to Gaz, "My flight's tomorrow, mate." This was Thursday. I said, "My flight's tomorrow, Friday." He says, "Mate, you're signing." And I was like, "Okay, no dramas." So it's funny, I had a 25% sell-on clause in my contract for Marconi for any transfer fee that they got. So my dad put that in and that was natural. And so Gaz come up to me and says, "I spoke to the Labazetta brothers. They said they're willing to sell you for 250 grand as long as you take your 25% down to 5%. And I was like, "Yeah, okay, no dramas." And I just said, "Yeah, no problem, mate." So signed a 2-year deal at Burnley, went straight into the first team, started playing, trying to work my way through this, playing beautiful football for Marconi Fairfield to now turning balls round the corner and down into channels in League One. So it took me a while, and Chris Waddle said, "You're a fantastic footballer, mate." He said, "But we've now got to get that other side of you." Not the tackling, because I was willing to tackle a bloody brick wall or a train. Yeah. It was more the one touch, two touch. You know, one touch when you can, two touch maximum. And I was like, mate, I was looking at Chris Waddle going, "You're one of the most skillful players in the world and you're asking me to play one and two touch." And he said, "But that's the environment we're in and that's the league we're in, unfortunately." So I then sort of learnt how to hook balls around the corner off throw-ins, how to receive balls on the half turn and lay people down the side and spinning centre forwards. My dad come and watched me about 6 months later. He goes, "What happened to you?" And I said, "Oh, what do you mean? I never returned to Australia." He goes, "Oh, you disappeared, blah, blah, blah." And we had a bit of a laugh about it. And he says, "But you've changed as a footballer." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, you're like a panel beater now, mate." He goes, "You were a very good footballer in Australia." I said, "Dad, the club's changed me. What do you want me to do? It's my job." And he goes, he says, "It's just sad to see as a dad." He says, "You've changed as a footballer." And I'll never forget it. And he was right. He was right, mate. I never got a chance to express myself. And in Australia, I'd dink the ball over your head. I'd run around the other side of you. I'd pick it up. I'd then meg you and I'd go flying past you. I'd whip in a ball. And I just never got a chance to do it in England. And I probably never got back to doing that until the second half of the 2000 Grand Final for Wollongong. I started to express myself.
What was Chris Waddle like as a manager, apart from obviously trying to convince you to adjust your game, what was he like as a manager?
He had three of the most unbelievable guys around him: Gordon Cowan, Glenn Roeder, and Chris Woods.
Well, they were unbelievable players, but how did they go as a coaching unit?
Struggled. struggled in the sense of they were very well respected. People management maybe wasn't as good as what it probably could have been. With me, it was fine because they signed me.
Yeah.
But in order to be successful, you've got to get 20, 30 lads on board. Now, we didn't have 20 or 30 lads on board. And is that a fault of theirs? I'm not sure. I can't say whether it is or it's not. But one thing that sticks out in my mind is we were good, but then people were from everywhere and everyone was travelling. And so I was the only one that lived in Burnley. Me and possibly another guy. And it was like, hey, where are all these people coming from? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we didn't feel as close-knit maybe as what it should have been. And the gaffer was travelling from Sheffield and Gordon Cowans was travelling from Birmingham. And we were in this little bubble of Burnley. And I just thought it could have all been brought together maybe a little bit better, that's all. But the training sessions from Glenn Roeder were excellent. He put on great sessions. The gaffer was the gaffer. So he was a player manager. So, sometimes the gaffer would give you the ball. Sometimes he wouldn't. If you didn't give the gaffer the ball,
you
know what I mean? Yeah, you got it. He took all the free kicks, all the penalties, all the corners, and just walked around in between, bless him. And mate, I'll put my hand up. Gaffer, I'm willing to do all your donkey work, mate. I got no problem with that, But yeah, it was just funny how it worked. And yeah, great people, mate, but just struggled. We nearly got relegated that first season, and then they got the sack, and he's never coached since. Chris Waddle.
Yeah, true. Well, I think it's a classic case of great players who probably, wanted to, but for whatever reason, it didn't work for them. But I guess if you can't win the dressing room, if you can't get players to buy in, at some point that's going to come. It's going to come undone for you, isn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that that was probably the unhinging of it was that, and it's sad because I would have loved to have played for Chris Waddle for many years, and if he had have stayed there, then I probably would have been the person that stayed at Burnley for all my career because I loved the football club. Okay,
so they've remodelled you into a panel beater. At some point, you've come home back to Wollongong. Now, I've looked at the stats. There's not a lot of games for Wollongong when you came back. So you can tell me why. But in amongst that, there's one amazing game, of which you clearly didn't play as a panel beater when you came on. You come on at halftime, is that right? You're a halftime substitute? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the grand final. So firstly, why did you come back to Wollongong? How did that come about?
So it was in the lead up to the Sydney Olympics 2000. And I'd had a fallout with the manager at Burnley at the time, who was Stan Turnant. A big fallout, right? Because the big fallout was I wanted to play for Australia. So we had all these camps. We were going here, there, and everywhere. We were going to Tunisia. We were going to London. We were travelling, mate, and we were playing tournaments for these under 23s in the lead up to the Australian Olympics. So then I'm doing all of what I'm doing, and he turns around and says, I don't want you to play for Australia. I was like, what? And he goes, that's only good for Mark Robertson. It's only good for, Australian football. It's not good for me. So I'm like, right. I'd seen Harry Kewell had done this. He said he wasn't going to play for Australia. FIFA then banned him from playing for Leeds. So I've explained this to the gaffer. I said, Gaffer, if I don't go play for Australia, they'll put in a FIFA ban for the X amount of time that I should have been away, and I can't play for you anyway. He refused to pay my wages, this gaffer, when I was away with Australia. How bizarre is this? I said, I'm just about to play in the Olympic Games as an Australian footballer for Burnley Football Club. When was the last time anyone played at the highest level of international football for Burnley? It's only good for you. And mate, he's gone off on this tangent, and we've had this massive fallout, seriously. So much so, we played Bristol Rovers or Bristol City away, and I was on the bench. And he goes, Robbo, warm up. I'm like, no problem. After that game, I was due to go into Watford for the under-23s Australian camp for a week. Robbo, warm up. No problem. Sprinting up and down, doing all my bits and bobs. And turns around, puts me on the field with 10 minutes to go, gets on the field. So I've rushed on the field and the ball's going about and I'm sort of chasing. I'm looking to get involved. I didn't touch the ball. Ball come to me. I passed it to someone. And then there was a break in play. So I started fixing up my shin pads because they still weren't on properly. And I'll never forget it. Andy Cook was standing like about 5 yards away. He goes, Robbo. And I went, yeah, pal, yeah. And he goes, look over at the board.
No way.
Yeah. Looked over at the board. My number's up. So he's playing funny buggers. And I looked at him, and he goes like that. So at Bristol City, when you come out, the dugouts are on the other side. So I'm nowhere near the tunnel now. So I'm thinking to myself, do I show some real balls and walk straight down the tunnel, or do I go back across and confront him? So I went back across and I just looked at him and he just ignored me. And you could smoke back then. He had his fag and stuff like that. So I took my shin pads out and I've rattled him into the dugout and I just walked. And it was the biggest walk of shame of the full length of the field that you could ever do. The fans were giving me dog's abuse, mate, right? So I went inside and the physio's in there running, the kit man's in there running the bath and getting everything organised. He goes, did you get sent off? I was like, no. And he goes, what are you doing in here? I said, the gaffer dragged me after he put me on. He goes, oh, Robbo. And I was like, yeah, I get it, mate. I get it. I said, how far is the train station from here? And he goes, oh, it's just down the road. I said, grab the minibus, mate. Take me. And he goes, are you serious? I said, yeah, I'm not even hanging around to speak to him. I jumped in the bus. He drove me down there to the train station. I just sat there with my sort of gear on thinking, mate, what has happened in my life here? So I got the train into town and went out to Watford, and Raul Blanco goes, hey, Marco, hey, how did you go? I said, I don't know. He goes, what? I said, I don't know what the final score was, Raul. And he goes, why? I says, the gaffer put me on and then dragged me off after I touched the ball once. He goes, it's not good, eh? And I said, no, I didn't know how to handle it. And he was playing games with me, mate. So I then was supposed to stay with the Australian team for a week. Gets a phone call on the Monday, and it was from the gaffer. And he goes, Robbo, he says, I'm sending the Fox down to pick you up tomorrow. I said, all right. He goes, we've got Stoke City at home tomorrow night, 7:45 kickoff. The Fox will pick you up at 9 a.m.
Who's the Fox?
The Fox was his sidekick.
Oh, cool.
So the Fox has jumped in a car at Burnley, drove down to Watford. What do you reckon, 5 hours?
Yeah, it's a good hike.
Good hike. Picks me up at the Hilton in Watford. And I jumped in the car and I looked at him. I go, what's this about, Fox? He goes, you know what he's like, Robbo. You know what the gaffer's like. And I'm like, he sent you down here to pick me up. And he goes, yeah. So I'm sitting there, said to Raul Blanco, I said, Raul, I've got to go. Anyway, drives up the road, 4 or 5 hours later, didn't really get a chance to go home or see my missus. Went straight to the ground, got ready. Game kicks off at 7:45. I'm knackered. Right, I'm on the bench. So anyway, warm up, Robbo. First half, warm up. Sat down. I thought I told you to warm up. I said I did, gaffer. Bearing in mind, mate, there's like 15, 20,000 people here. We're playing Stoke City. Big game. Okay. So he made me warm up pretty much for the whole half. So I thought, I ain't going on at halftime. He's taking the piss here. Do you know what I mean? Second half comes about. Warm up, Robbo. I went and warmed up. Come back and sat down. Anyone else would have told him to piss off. I thought I told you to warm up. Yeah. So the only sub unused in that game was Mark Robertson. And then at the end of it, he goes, blah, blah, blah. Right, Fox, take Robbo back to Watford. So I had to jump back in the car, drive back down to Watford. Got there at like 1 a.m. or something ridiculous. The lads were out. They were out. All the boys were out. So I've gone in quickly, got my stuff changed and just shot into London with the boys. And they're all like, how'd you go? How'd you go? And I was like, mate, I just spent like 10 hours in a car. Get me a beer. That's it. And just, and mate, my head was gone. So then obviously done a bit of fishing around. Long story short, the loan deal, it was a loan, was to come back to Wollongong. And it was an opportunity for me to get playing football under the nose of Raul Blanco. I've come back. Nick Theo didn't really fancy me because I was a panel beater. And I thought, what am I doing here, Nick? You sort of like, you were telling me on the phone when I was in Burnley, you're the man, blah, 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 blah. And they were playing free-flowing football, scoring goals for fun. We scored 72 goals that season. I played, mate, I'd be lucky if I played 3 or 4 games for Wollongong. I was on the bench. I wasn't on the bench. I was starting. I was getting dragged. And I was like, everything's just gone to pot here. And so it was no surprise. I was on the bench for the grand final and I was fuming, mate. I was like, I should have been playing, right? And in the lead up to the final, I kind of sensed it and stuff like that. So I didn't live the right lifestyle in the lead up to the final. And long story short, I was pissed off. And I said to him at halftime, I said, you're going to make changes. You got to make changes. And I started being a little bit verbal and he made the changes and he put me on and he come up to me to say like all the best and stuff. And I just
so
sort of threw.
To set the scene, you're 3-0 down in the grand final at halftime.
Yeah, so you've got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And as a footballer, right, it doesn't matter if there's 100,000 people there. What have you got to lose? You're 3-0 down. So the old Mark Robertson come out in a sense of tackling, passing, ability to run with the ball, ability to change direction, ability to use both feet. And I'm not pumping my own tyres up because I've done this for years as a kid. They come out.
Mm.
Give me the ball, I'm taking the free kick. Give me the ball, I'm taking the corner. Don't anybody get in my way because Stan Turnant's pissed me off and so is Nick Theodorakopoulos. So I don't care if Dino Manillo wants the ball for a free kick or Reedy or Horsley. Get out of my way because this is my time now. And the rest is kind of a little bit of history in that respect. You know?
Oh, absolutely. 3-0 down half time, 3-3, and one of the longest penalty shootouts that we've had in terms of grand finals, definitely in Australia. A historical comeback, memorable win. But obviously the shackles are off and you're at the couldn't give a flying fox about what was the next 45 minutes / extra time / you just didn't care at that stage, did you?
No.
No
fear.
Shackles,
no fear. I feel sorry for Troy Halpin. I opened him up with an elbow on the sideline. I feel sorry for Casey Werman because I gave Casey absolute grief. There was people there that I was just taking my anger out on, and but why should it take that to bring an expressive footballer to the forefront? Why? And you know, I spoke to Clayton Zane, who was in camp with the Socceroos, and the whole Socceroos sat and they watched the game, and he was saying, he goes, Robbo, mate, he goes, the way everyone was speaking about you was just like, far out, mate. Like, what? That's Robbo, you know? Like, and I was like, well, yeah. And I kind of felt like a little bit of weight had been lifted off my shoulders, if that makes sense. So then to get some accolades at the end and stuff like that, I was like, this is the way my career should have went. And it didn't.
Yeah.
You know, but you got to take accountability and responsibility for yourself, mate. And so I had some ups and downs there, mate.
Of course. So that would have got you back in the shop window for you've had a taste of overseas, and Burnley would have, in the end, you would have been bitter and twisted, and of course you're only going on loan. So when you're on loan, in your head, you're always heading back, right?
Yeah, to play for someone that you despise and you don't like.
Yeah.
So
you didn't go back. So you went to Swindon. How did that? Did Swindon? Did you go on loan or was it a transfer?
Yeah, so I refused my contract at Burnley. Burnley had offered me a 3-year deal, and the gaffer kept calling me, and I answered the phone. And instead of calling him gaffer, I started calling him Stan. And he goes, "You disrespect me again, blah, blah, blah." I said, "Mate, what are you going to do? The bullying days are over, mate. I'm in Australia now. I'm sat in the sunshine. I refuse to go back." And not many people know this, mate, but he was like, "You little bastard, you best get back here. Pre-season starts tomorrow." I said, "I ain't coming back." And I used to hold the phone there. And my old man was sat next to me going, "Is he for real?" And I was like, and then people wonder why I don't want to go back there.
Yeah.
I had a house sitting there, mate. I bought a house and a car, and my life was there, and I refused to go back.
Yeah.
And I said, I refuse. 3-year deal. No. Don't want to. Wages kept going up in this bargaining sort of thing. No, I don't care what you give me. I ain't coming back. All right, I'm holding your registration. I'm going to hold you under a Bosman. You're 22, 21. I said, that's fine. I said, I will never return to England. I will never play football in England again, if that's what you're saying, until that Bosman finishes at the age of 24. And then I'll come back on a free and I'll prove you wrong. So this was the conversation. No one knows these. You're the first person I've told. So then I'm sitting there. Frank Trimboli, who is a massive, massive football agent now, Aussie, not many people know, owner of Base Football, rings me, "Robbo, I've secured you a deal at Swindon Town for 3.5 years." I said, "I don't believe you," because why would someone in England want to sign me? Plus, they have to pay money. He says they're willing to pay £100,000 for you. When you were on the periphery at Burnley and the gaffer didn't want you, you played against Man City, didn't you, in the reserves? I said, yeah. He goes, what was the score? I said, 2-0. He says, did you score? I said, yeah, I scored both. Colin Todd was at the game and he wants to sign you. He paid the $100,000. I went down there, signed a contract, great wages. I think it was one of the highest paid player at the club. Couldn't believe it, mate. I made Frank fax me the contract because I didn't believe him.
Yeah.
3.5 years. Look, showed my missus. And I said, well, what's the catch? He goes, well, you got to fly out in the morning from Sydney Airport. So I had a quick barbie, a few beers with sort of like everyone and said, see you later. And that was it. My wife was pregnant. She was heavily pregnant, 8 months pregnant, sort of 7 months pregnant. And went to Burnley, signed my contract, got put up in a beautiful hotel for 3 months. And the wheels fall off the cart, mate. I went in the day I arrived. I went in the next day. So the club had picked me up, put me in a beautiful hotel, put the wife in. She was pregnant. I went in the next day and met the gaffer. Hey, Mark, nice to meet you. Paid some money for you, blah, blah, blah. Welcome. Good contract. Yeah, I'm happy with the contract, blah, blah, blah. Signed the contract, everything. He goes, there's a game this Arvo, and this was on the Tuesday. Do you want to shake the cobwebs out your legs for Saturday? Because you'll play on Saturday in the first team. And I was like, oh. I said, not really. I said, I flew in yesterday and jet lag and blah, blah, blah. And probably I'd had a few beers as well, right? So I was like, I don't want to play in this game. So I played in the game, right? And they played me centre forward. And comes off at the end and someone says, oh, the gaffer wants you in his office. Colin Todd, legend of English football, mate.
Yeah.
I've gone in.
And whatever, yeah.
So Colin Todd's sitting there. Andy King, another legend of Everton, sitting there. So that was his assistant. And the agent. What the hell was that? I said, sorry? He says, what the hell was that you just dished up there? And I said, I don't quite get where this is coming from. And the agent, was sat there and he was like, oh, mate, he goes, I don't know what to say. And I'm like, this isn't right. Well, what's going on here? Anyway, so they've turned around and said, I didn't put in enough effort and maybe Stan Turnant was right about me. I was like, what?
Wow.
I said, for starters, you played me centre forward and I'm a centre midfielder. And secondly, I just got off a plane yesterday. So this whole thing has gone to pot. And I'm thinking, someone's winding me up. He says, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to take your contract and we're going to put it in the bottom drawer until you start looking like you want to be here instead of what Stan was saying and wanting to play for Australia. You can imagine, mate. You can imagine at this stage. I've lost the plot, mate. And I didn't know whether to have a go or not. I'm thinking, I've got to be here for 3.5 years. So I went home and I said to my dad, I said, Dad, this has happened. And he goes, really? He goes, but you've signed your contract. I said, yeah, but they asked me there and then to sign a counter to say that I'd go on to a 3-month until I proved myself. And he goes, you didn't sign it though, did you? And I said, well, I did that. I felt really intimidated, mate. I said, there was like 3 people in that room that were all disgusted in the way I turned out for Swindon in a trial match against Shropshire Town or something ridiculous. Yeah. And I played centre forward. And he goes, doesn't sound right. Anyway, so I said afterwards, and you played me centre forward. And I says, when we come and watched you play for Burnley reserves against Man City, you scored 2 and you were playing centre forward. I said, so you paid $100,000 for someone who you think's a centre forward because silly bollocks up the road was playing games with me and putting me up front instead of playing me in my natural position. This ain't right. Scratching my head, I was. Scratching my head. Come the end of the 3 months, we won't be sort of reigniting the 3-year deal. And I went back to Australia.
What an experience. You can't write horror stories like that.
Mate, it's not the way my career was meant to go. I then got a phone call from Frank Trimboli saying that Dundee wanted to sign me. I said, Dundee? And I was like, wow. I said, that's Scottish Premier League. He goes, yeah. And I said, mate, you're going to have to fax me the contract because I don't quite believe it. And after everything that's just gone on at Swindon, I'm losing the plot. 3.5-year deal, one of the best players at the club, blah, blah, blah. Signed, sealed, delivered. I then turned up there and the manager called me Australian boy for the first 4 weeks. He didn't know my name. What is going on here, mate?
Who signed you then?
The chairman.
That's never a good sign.
No, so now I'm digging holes left, right and centre, trying to express myself. I've now got my newborn kid and then another one on the way sort of later. Oh, it's just like... So I've become bitter about football, mate. Very, very bitter. And so I'd seen out the 3 years almost, and the club went into administration. And as a high wage earner, you'll no longer be employed. So the next day, I'm no longer employed. So long story short, gets a phone call. Sammy McIlroy, another legend. I've only been coached by legends, mate, that played at the highest level, but really lacked in man management and people skills.
I'm really curious to know how Sammy stacks up here.
I love Sammy, mate. I love Sammy.
Yeah, but
again, we struggled, mate. We struggled.
But what was he like? Was he better? Was he better with his man management?
Yeah. Sammy loved me, put me as like captain. Everything, hung his hat on me. But by this stage, I've been running through brick walls for that many years. He was getting a fraction of the player, mate. Do you know what I mean? He's getting someone that's broken physically and mentally.
Yeah.
And he's hanging his hopes on Mark Robertson of achieving this massive thing for such a big club, Stockport County.
Yeah. Had you become cynical? Had you become cynical as well? Do you reckon?
1,000%, mate.
Yeah. And obviously,
what was I supposed to do? I had a family to feed.
No. But what I'm saying is, and with that cynicism, you become jaded, and it's become a job. So, hence, surely your performances would have dropped away as well, or do you think perhaps?
1,000%, 1,000%. But then everyone thought I was a great player for the club. I'm thinking, you don't know what you've got here, mate. You've got a fraction of a person that you could have had.
Yeah. That
could have. Anyway, I'm not blaming other people, mate. I'm just saying.
No, but that's the journey, right? That's what's happened through the journey. You've altered. You're like, little bit of a change at Burnley, a little bit of a change at Wollongong, a little bit of a change against Swindon. Along the way, your confidence gets chipped at, your understanding of what, your dream is no longer your dream. It's becoming just a job and a nightmare, isn't it?
It was, mate. And every day was I had to swallow a bitter pill to get into training. Long story short, I had my knee reconstructed at Marconi when I was 16, when I first went in, when we go back to those days of being called into the first team. And so I spent 11 months on the sideline rehabbing that. And I don't think that ever got right. So I'm now like 27 at Stockport, knowing fine well my career's not going very far. And so I had a specialist say to me, if you don't sort that knee out now, you won't be able to run around with your kids in the backyard in several years. Your knee's sloppy. It's like a 70-year-old's knee. So I got an operation at Stockport. Sammy got the sack because we didn't perform for the finances that we were all on, and the players.
Did McElroy take you to Stockport as well, did he?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So the relationship was good.
Yeah, really good. And I just said, sorry, Gaffer, it is what it is. And, he moved on. And so then I had my knee reconstructed for the second time. And that was pretty much a failed attempt. So then I ended up having 3 knee reconstructions on the same knee. Now, one at 16 could almost finish people. I had 3. And to go through that mentally was hard. To go through it physically was even harder. So in the end, I was over it, mate. I was like, get me out of here, mate. Just someone come down from the moon and zap me away and take me away from all of this hell. Although I did enjoy the media side. So I'd done a lot for the media for Stockport. I'd done a lot of the face-to-face stuff. I'd done a lot of radio, and I then become half decent at speaking and sort of getting my point across, that I kind of went down that road towards the end when I was injured and doing a lot of radio and stuff like that. So when I went back to Australia, I went back to Perth Glory, and there's no doubt about it. They got another fractured man that went in there, and I played 90 minutes for them. I played 45 minutes in my first game and tore both adductor tendons off the bone. So I got an operation at the St John's Hospital in Perth, and then loads of pills to stop the pain. And I tried to get back out there, and I went in for a tackle on Boxing Day against Adelaide United, and tore my quad muscle. So like grade 3 tear in my quad. And it was on the quad of the knee that had been reconstructed 3 times. So I didn't have the flexion. So that popped. Never forget it. Angelo Costanzo was there, and I've gone in for it. And I just screamed. And he looked at me, he goes, "You okay, Rob?" I went, "Oh, fuck." I said, "My quad, man." I said, "I don't know what's happened." And just it had its own heartbeat straight away. And I've been injured loads of times, and I knew there was something wrong. So they never renewed my contract. I was clutching. I was still only 28 at this stage. And my mate, Buddy Farah, says, "I've got a contract for you in Hungary." And
This is really interesting for me. I really want to know what made you do
it. But the person I am, I still felt I had so much to prove to other people. Why am I proving things to anyone? It's like I should be able to do this myself. Do you know what I mean? Like what is going on? Like, do it for yourself. And so it's crazy, I went through this whole process, and I went to Hungary by myself, left my wife and 2 kids in Australia, and I'm living in this like town called Sopron, which was on the border of Austria, and with people that didn't speak English. And I'm like, "Robbo, what are you doing here, mate?" And so then Cozzy was out on the piss one night with my dad, and I get this phone call, and my dad goes,
Did you play any football there?
No.
No, okay.
I was there for 4 months.
And you didn't play any football?
No.
Why?
Trained I don't know. I honestly don't know. I was getting paid. I was getting paid. The team was travelling. I wouldn't travel. I didn't know who to speak to. No one spoke English. I had a fight my first day there. It's like, it's bizarre.
This is Swindon and Burnley all rolled into one.
So I just hit every nightclub possible in Sopron every weekend when the team was away. And I was like, mate, what am I doing here, man? Like living in a beautiful 5-star hotel, just floating around Europe. And I was like, this ain't right.
Yeah, okay. So you got the call from Cozzy, did you?
Yeah, he goes, would you come back to Sydney FC as an injury replacement? I said, I'd come tomorrow. And he goes, done. I went down to Vienna Airport the next day and booked a flight and got out of there, mate. Didn't even say goodbye to anyone.
No, well, do they know that you've left? Do they ever know that you left? Really, because it sounds like they didn't know you left.
And it was the worst league in the world. I probably would have done very well there. And I was like, mate, what is going on here? You know. And look, again, I have to take responsibility for myself and say, was I the right person in the right frame of mind to be there? Probably not. So then I come back to Sydney and Cozzy said to me, he goes, I need a big favour from you. I said, yeah, what's that? And he says, I need you to play sweeper. I said, yeah, no problem. He goes, I'm going to put you in the middle of Popper, left side centre half, and Fifey, right side centre half. You in the middle. We're going to play Chucky on one side as a wing back, and we're going to play Alvin Checkley, I think it was, on the left side as a wing back. Can you do it? And I was like, yeah, piece of piss, Cozzy, mate. No problem. I says, I'll give it the Ned Zelic if you want. I'll come flying out with the ball. And I was on a hiding to nothing, right? So we played Central Coast Mariners away. I don't know if you ever remember it. The game in the A-League, which was the final score was 5-4. And it was like...
Rings a bell.
Supposed to be the next best game outside of the old NSL Grand Final. And here's me floating about in that. And I'm thinking, how on earth have I played in Australia, two of Australia's greatest games, but then never really kicked the ball in between? I'd had 10 operations. I'd played a handful of games across the world, and everyone had hyped up this player to be a fantastic player, but I've done nothing. And I'm sitting there going... So anyway, Dean Heffernan opened the valves up down the side towards the end, and I started sprinting. I tore my hamstring. So I've come in at the end, everyone's jumping around, and I'm nearly crying, mate, because I've torn my hammy. And Cozzy's like, brilliant, Robbo, you're outstanding, this and that. And I says, I don't know how to tell you, mate, but I've torn my hammy. And that was the last game I played for Sydney FC. And at the end of it, he just... Long story short, he said the medical staff have said that your body's not great, and it doesn't matter how much I love you and blah, blah, blah. He says, I'm not going to be able to sign you. And I said, mate, totally understand. I wouldn't sign me, you know, and he was told when he was initially signing me that the history of my my injuries and stuff wasn't good. And his quote, and I'll never forget it to this day, is, I don't care if Robbo's got one leg, I need that boy in my changing room. And that was the whole camaraderie and the people's person. And so Cozzy vouched for me in that respect. And he went above and beyond. Insurance wouldn't cover me. Sydney FC insurance wouldn't cover me because I'd had 3 knee reconstructions and 10 operations around this body. But he still wanted me in that changing room.
Yeah, but it's good. It's still good to be loved, isn't it, really, by a manager that wants you there for a host of reasons, including those off the field, you know, that leadership, the camaraderie, which is all important for team balance, team success.
Yeah, I still didn't feel part of it though, mate.
Because you were there, but you get what I'm saying? Like the fact that a manager actually showed some warmth and probably some sort of management, some sort of people skills, that made you think he actually had a plan, like he was trying to do something beyond just putting a player on the pitch and turn him into a panel beater.
Yeah, and you become a piece of meat, unfortunately, and I allowed that to happen. Like, I look back on it, I allowed that to happen.
Yeah.
I should have said, no, this is the way I play football. And if you're trying to make me a panel beat, I'm not going to be. But I got caught up in everything, and I started playing the most unattractive football that you can play. But then I'd have moments of brilliance where Celtic then made an inquiry about me to Burnley to sign me. And I'm thinking, how's this even possible, mate? Like, I'm not the player that I should be or wanted to be, or the player that, say, Andrea Cardi watched in that trial match out the back to then bring me in there, or for what people had seen in 45 minutes and extra time for a grand final, or what people had seen in a Youth World Cup when I'd sort of done a few bits and pieces. And I kind of, a lot of it was unfinished business, if that makes sense.
No, I understand 100%. Couple of questions about the journey along the way. Along the way, you did make one Socceroo appearance. I think you played 45 minutes against Japan in 2000-ish, in front of about 60,000 as well. So it was a pretty decent crowd. What's your memories of one? You also mentioned earlier Frank Farina used to babysit you. So then your babysitter ends up selecting you to play your one cap for Australia. Is that right? Is that
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so at the time I was doing well for Dundee in the Scottish Premier League. And it was late at night. I got a phone call, and it's Robbo, it's Frank. We've got a game coming up, and it was like an Asian final game. And I was like, okay, yeah. And he says, and I want you in the squad. And I said, okay, no problem. He says, you're doing well. And I was like, cool, no problem. So I basically flew to Japan, got to Japan, settled in with the boys. I'm going to say Matty Bingley was was it Bingers or Luke Casserly was my roommate? So had a great time. Went into the game, 45 minutes of chasing a football. Very limited amount of time on the ball. And I was shot to pieces come the end of the 45. And Frank had sort of looked at me, says, how you feeling? I said, mate, Hammy's tight, blah, blah, blah. He changed me at half-time, eh? I come off at half-time.
Yeah.
And if ever there was a player that you'd want to have in the trenches, it probably would have been me. So for the fact that I'm getting taken off at half-time, kind of said it all. If I'm being honest, and I'm sitting there going, where is this going? Do you know what I mean? Like, is it meant to be for me? Is it not meant to be for me? Again, had I treated my body in the right way in the lead up to that game, or had my body failed me? Was the question. Hamstring was tweaked 1,000%, and these aren't excuses. But how could my body be in the right state when it was never in the right state anyway? And to sit inside for the best part of 15 minutes, 20 minutes, get a shower, the boys are out there. I was just so thankful to not be out there because I was in that much pain.
Yeah. Okay.
How sad is that?
Yeah, look, there's a sadness to it. I guess especially in the moment, and I can understand that because obviously you've been through the youth teams, you've captained Australia, you've grown up, you want to do it. This is the dream, right? I get that 100% as a footballer. And in the moment, you would have been probably even devastated. You know what I mean? But looking back now, I'm sensing that with what you know and what you've learned along the way, you're sitting here saying, hey, I played for Australia. I'm rapt to have played 45 minutes for Australia.
Yeah, not happy enough for that, mate.
I'm not saying that you've got to be happy with it, but I'm happy that you actually got to do it.
Okay, so here you go. I've never watched the game again in my life, and I don't have a photo from that game. So for me, would I have been better not playing one game for Australia? Who knows? Because at the end of the day, I'm Australian. My best memories were captaining my country through the best part of lead-ups to tournaments and standing for national anthems. I'll go as far as to say is there was some players probably not as talented that went on to have loads and loads of different caps.
Yeah, that happens.
And I wouldn't say not the right characters, but I would just say, kind of look at it and I think, how is that even possible that you've been in that situation where I personally believe I was good enough to play X amount of caps. You've played 45 minutes. Someone sent you a cap with a number on it, and you've never watched that game back, or you don't even have a photo in your house. I don't even know if there was a team photo that day or an action photo. And it eats me up each day. I should have all of that memorabilia. I should be hanging on to playing for my country. But unfortunately, I don't, because of circumstances that were, partly my fault, but then partly mishaps along the way where you're in a body and the brain's working better than what the body's working. And unfortunately, you find yourself sitting here today going, okay, yeah, but I don't walk around telling everyone I was a Socceroo, because ultimately I wasn't a Socceroo, mate. I was a part, and that's...
Let me tell you, mate, I mean, I love this game and I love Australian football and I love the Socceroos. And I'd give that or a leg to have had that 45 minutes.
I know, mate.
You might not be there yet. You're going to get there. I'm going to release a video tomorrow of an interview I did a few weeks ago of a guy that's nearly 80, travelled the opposite way. He came from England, came to Australia to play, played 2 caps for Australia in 1965 World Cup qualifying campaign, our very first. And he treasures those 2 caps and his Aussie citizenship and his Socceroo shirt like nothing. Born and bred in Barnsley. He's a Yorkshire lad. Still lives there. Went home, but loves the fact that he represented Australia. And I reckon in time, I think you'll alter your thinking, even just slightly. You'll be less cynical.
Yeah, and I'm not egotistic, so I don't...
No, that's fine. I'm not in any way having a crack at your ego or whatever. I just think in time you'll treasure that for 45. When you realise there's guys like me who would kill to have that 45 minutes or come off the bench for 10 minutes at the end of a game. Do you know what I mean? Because it's still a treasured thing to represent your country. And to get there, you've done well.
Yeah, and I remember having this conversation with Ufuk Talay, and Ufi was a super talented player. We played together at Marconi. He went on and had a great career, and he turned around and said, "Robbo, at least you played for Australia." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He says, "Mate, I never played for the Socceroos. Didn't even get on the field for a minute." So to hear that from him should have been the shock to sort of say, we all wanted to play for our country. There's no doubt about it, mate. Whether you are young and coming through, we all wanted to play for our country, and I'm no different. I just wasn't happy in the way that it played out. But I reckon you're right. I do have pride and joy. I've got the jerseys framed, the caps in it. My mum and dad have got the pride of joy, and they've got it in their house and stuff like that. And I do because, I kind of felt like after I retired from football, I was able to turn around and say, I do have experiences to offer people. What sort of experiences? Well, international football for starters, professional football, part-time football, apprenticeship, all the way down. I've probably ticked all the boxes if you think about it, and so that's what I give now to my son and certain athletes along the way.
Good on you, mate. It's been a great journey. Hey, I've got a couple of things I'm going to throw to you without notice that with my research I've come up with. So lockdown, UK.
Brilliant.
Tell me about Starbucks.
Oh, mate, I think I'm addicted to it. Every day, but look, there's a story to this because my wife doesn't drink coffee, and my wife doesn't drink coffee, and my son doesn't drink coffee.
What's wrong with them?
Yeah, I know. My daughter's turning 20. I gave up drinking alcohol nearly 3 years ago. So I'm teetotal, right? And for some reason, I've gone to the addiction of coffee. Now, I've never been a coffee person or whatever. So every day I get a nice latte and a flat white. So I headlocked my daughter and I said, I can't influence the others to have a coffee date with me. You're coming. She's like, Dad, Dad, Dad. So now she is the one that rings me every day. Coffee date, coffee date, coffee date. I'm like, 2, right? So I sit at the front window here like a puppy dog, waiting for my daughter to come and get me. And then boom, we're off to Starbucks every day. So it's a lockdown was a nightmare because you can't go in and spend an hour or 2. So we used to get our little drive through at Manchester near the Trafford Centre. And then we'd go sit somewhere in some car park and just chin wag to each other and have a great laugh and bonding with my daughter. But what most people don't know is, unfortunately, there was always a ham and cheese toastie and a half a fruit loaf that we would buy as well. So I'm now best part of 20 quid down a day at Starbucks, mate. So I've actually bought shares in the joint.
Yeah, you have. You've spent well and truly. Well done. That's good. All right. Now, had a brilliant career, young Socceroo, apprentice and senior player at Marconi, the big NSL Grand Final. You went to Hungary. We'll call it that. You didn't play in Hungary, but you went.
Nah,
you went on the tour and you got the T-shirt.
I was the best paid backpacker in Hungary for 4 months.
Well done. All right. And Swindon and Stockport and Dundee and St Johnstone. Well travelled with the Socceroos. You've been to some amazing places. Football's been terrific. And now you're in a football town, in a football city at Manchester, and you're still working in the game. Now, I got told the best goal that you've ever seen in your whole career was at the Super Oldies in Queensland by the young Georgie Campbell a few years ago. Can you verify this or not?
Well, let me tell you, he would have come on off the bench. He would have come on off the bench for starters because he did not work hard enough to start in the game, right?
He was put on some weight by then.
Fantastic footballer, but the boys used to slaughter him for not working hard enough. So roll on, roll off subs. And the wee man, I'd never seen him play before. So for him to be the age that he was and for me to be the age that I was, and I was blowing in the game, I can only imagine what he was going through. And just that ability to drift, and I'm going to pump his tyres up here, the ability to control the ball and move with it and drift with it with both feet and strike the ball was second to none. Meanwhile, copping that much grief from everyone else on the field to either pass the ball or when you lose it, get back, you little shit.
There's no chasing back and there's no passing.
No. So I was in awe of this guy. He was me. He was what I wanted to be. But I would have sprinted back if I lost the ball, and I was maybe too honest. And I just looked at him. I thought, this guy's a legend, you know.
As a bona fide member of the Wingers Union, he would be thrown out of the union if he was caught chasing back, let me tell you. And as a self-appointed president of the Wingers Union, if I caught anyone chasing back, I'd be really disappointed. Their membership would be at risk.
So now they play with inverted wingers, so you would absolutely struggle. So would little GC, mate.
Yeah, he would. No, he's a legend, and he said to say hello, as did Andrew McDermott. So
yeah, brilliant, mate. Brilliant. I've got loads of friends in the game. I call them friends because ultimately, if ever they picked up the phone and rang me, then I'd be there for them. No,
that's good. Look, mate, thank you. I really do appreciate you giving me so much of your time. It's been a wonderful story and a wonderful discussion and very honest and open. And so I really do appreciate you sharing your story with me and being so open about it. Hopefully we will continue to chat and continue to liaise over social media. And good luck in the near future. And obviously we wish young Alexander all the best going forward. And our fingers are crossed down here that he ends up in a green and gold shirt, mate. You know how important that is to us.
No, I know, and I feel the same passion, and I share the same dream, and ultimately his career will be what it'll be, and he'll sit here with someone in many years' time talking about his experiences, and they're going to be far different to mine. But hey, I can only be the person here now to try and help and mentor him to be the best that he can be, and be accountable for his own experiences in life, and be responsible for them as well.
All right. So accountable and responsible, they're the two keys, right?
Massive, mate. Massive.
Beautiful. Thanks for your time, mate. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, mate. I don't want to be a stranger to Australian football. So anytime, mate. I'm always here.
Thank you very much.
All right, mate. Take care, eh?